We'll call this June 5th, 2023 meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. May we have the roll call?
Andre Spinelli.
Here.
Radhika Krishna.
Here.
Scott Poulos.
Here.
Jeff Ron.
Here.
Brandy Eber.
Here.
Daniel George.
Here.
Greg Strike.
Here.
Jared Gardner and Jim Hester are excused. You have a quorum. Thank you.
Okay, can we have a motion to approve the minutes? Moved by Scott Poulos, seconded by Jeff Ron. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Okay. Next, special order of business. Are there any disclosures? Commissioner Strike?
As I was not seated on the commission at the time of these hearings, I will not be voting on those that are identified in the consent agenda.
Commissioner Poulos?
No disclosures.
Commissioner Krishna?
Yes, I have one item to disclose. In the matter of case 2023-0030, I'd like to disclose that Mr. Bill Popp, who submitted a comment that's included in our packet, and I believe is also here intending to testify tonight, sits on the board of directors of the organization for which I work. I have not had any private conversations with either this individual or anyone else regarding this case.
Would anyone like to make a motion to direct Commissioner Krishna to participate?
Yes, Commissioner Strike. I would motion that the commissioner be directed to participate.
Second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the vote. Okay, that passes. You will participate. Commissioner Ron, anything to disclose?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the case of 2023-0030, likely, well, I would say in no way conflict of interest, but would like to head off any perception therein. I think it's more of a common interest around soccer, which I think will play quite a bit into tonight's discussion. Personally interested in my child's success as a soccer player in Anchorage, not for the club, which we'll likely be hearing a lot about. So again, no direct financial interest in the outcome of today's case, but did want to get that out there. Thanks.
Commissioner George, anything to disclose?
No disclosures.
And I do have a disclosure, so I will hand the gavel over to Commissioner Krishna. I also grew up playing soccer in Anchorage, have kids that play soccer, and very interested in soccer. But I also own land in the Sand Lake area and was visited by a resident of the neighborhood that brought some materials that have been submitted into the packet and was made aware that this was happening, and I just wanted to disclose that. I do not feel that I have any conflict and can remain impartial, but if the commission would like to weigh in on that, so be it.
Would anyone like to make a motion directing Commissioner Spinelli to participate in this case?
I would move to direct that Commissioner Spinelli and Commissioner Ron be directed to participate. And I think it's understood that the role of sports and so forth is predominant across the Anchorage Bowl, so it's not unreasonable to expect that commissioners will sit on and listen to motions, listen to hearings and so forth that involve the community. In fact, I think it's that broad breadth that brings this community closer together.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and take a vote.
Ms. Eber?
Yes.
Thank you.
That vote passes, and with that, I'll hand the gavel back to Commissioner Spinelli.
Okay, on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Commissioner Pullis, seconded by Commissioner Krishna. Is there anyone wishing to pull an item for discussion? Hearing none. Any objection to approving the consent agenda? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. Next on the agenda is public hearings. And I'll read the process. The procedure by which the public may speak to the commission at this meeting is: 1, after staff presentation is completed on the public hearing items, the chair will ask the public for testimony on this issue. 2, persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the commission rules and procedures. A petitioner, including his or her representatives, will receive 10 minutes. Part of this time may be reserved for rebuttal. Representatives of groups, community councils, PTAs, etc., will receive 5 minutes. Individuals will receive 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the commission. Any party of interest wishing to appeal shall first file with the planning director within 7 days of the commission's decision made on the record a written notice of intent to appeal in accordance with AMC 2103-050A-4A. Commission recommendations to the Anchorage Assembly are not appealable. Following approval of the written findings of fact and decision, any party of interest may, within 20 days, file an appeal by filing a notice of appeal and paying the appeal fee and deposit in accordance with Section 2103-050. The notice of the appeal must be filed with the planning director on a form prescribed by the municipality. If the appellant is not the applicant, the appellant's notice of appeal shall include proof of service on the applicant. Okay, I guess we will open up case 2023-0030. May we please have staff's presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is an existing conditional use permit for land reclamation at this site, and it will expire next year. There's still 800,000 cubic yards of fill left to be deposited under the current approval. AS&G is requesting to amend the conditional use for land reclamation to continue the fill operation for 10 years, increase the total amount of fill by 900,000 cubic yards, and to change the grading plan to include a hill near the center of the site. Upon completion of the conditional use permit for land reclamation, the Public Lands and Institutions District regulations will govern the future uses allowed on the property. It's currently zoned PLI, and the PLI district allows a wide variety of community-related uses by right. This application includes a site plan layout for a recreational sports park. The soccer fields, trails, pavilions, sledding hill, farmers market, and the associated parking lot that are shown on the site plan layout are all permitted by right in the PLI district. You can find that on page 49 of your packet. The site has been a fill operation for decades, and the final use of this privately owned property has been shown as different versions of open space and sports fields for many years. The application shows a new park plan with 7 soccer fields, trails, pavilions, sledding hill, farmers market, parking lots, and the total number of parking spaces shown is 414, with 137 of them being open year-round. 479 public hearing notices were mailed on April 5th and then again on April 26th. There were numerous written public comments received, and they are attached, all of them. The Sand Lake Community Council provided a resolution opposing the application. The applicant provided letters of support from the executive director of Cook Inlet Soccer Club and from the president and CEO of the Anchorage Economic Development Corporation, and those letters can be found on, so the public comments, let me begin again. The Community Council resolution is on page 250 of your packet, and then the 2 letters of support from Cook Inlet Soccer Club and AEDC are on pages 71 and 72 of your packet. State and municipal reviewing agencies have no objection to this application. The Building Safety Division provided comments stating that a fill and grade permit would be required. That's on page 143 of your packet. There was a pre-application with state and municipal agencies and the applicant held in December, and then there was a community meeting with the Community Council, a community meeting held in January. In terms of the approval criteria for conditional uses, approval criteria 1 is met. Anchorage 2040 designates most of the petition site as other open space. The West Anchorage District Plan also identifies it as other area that functions as park and natural resource. Land reclamation is a temporary use that causes off-site impacts on surrounding properties, especially to nearby residential neighborhoods and parks. The primary negative impacts are noise, dust, and truck traffic. This site should not become a permanent land reclamation operation. The temporary use of the site for land reclamation is necessary to transition to a more permanent use such as open space. Note that this is privately owned land. The future park uses that are shown in the site plan layout are compatible with the surrounding residential neighborhood and the parks, the public parks that it has as neighbors, the Edna Fisk Memorial Park and the Jade Street Park. Park uses do not require a conditional use permit because they are permitted by right in the PLI district. Approval criteria 2 is met. The proposed amendment to the existing conditional use permit for land reclamation does not conflict with the intent of the zoning district nor the PLI district-specific standards. I've listed the special limitations on the zoning, the R2M SL and B1A SL in the southwest corner, and the district-specific standards for the PLI, the R2M, and the B1A. Approval criteria 3 is met. It complies with the use-specific standards for land reclamation. Approval criteria 4 is met. The site is adequate for land reclamation in terms of site size, shape, location, and topography. The petition site has 4 tracts of land containing 76 acres. The revised grading and drainage plan shows a 68-foot tall hill near the center of the site. The shadow analysis included in this application shows that the hill will not shade the surrounding residential properties at 8 a.m., at noon, and at 4 p.m. on the summer and winter solstices and the spring and fall equinoxes. That illustration is on page 52 of your packet. The grading and drainage plan shows that the top of the proposed sledding hill will have a height of 230 feet mean sea level. The maximum allowed building height on the property per the Anchorage or the airport height ordinance is 300 feet. So they have the top of the hill will be 70 feet lower than it could be. The application includes a view angle detail which shows that the 68-foot tall hill will not be visible from the northern perimeter of the site. This is because the hill will be centrally located on the site, and there will be approximately 8-foot tall earthen berm on the north side of the property. The site plan and landscape plan show the earthen berm set back 45 feet from the north property boundary. Note that the PLI district allows 45-foot tall buildings to be located 25 feet from property lines abutting residential districts. Also, building height increases over 45 feet may be approved through a major site plan review or an institutional master plan. The toe of the hill is located 900 feet from the north property boundary. The land naturally slopes downhill to the south, so views from residential neighbors to the east vary depending on where they are located. Residential neighbors to the east near 84th Avenue have similar views as neighbors along the north property boundary. The homes on the southern end of Endicott Street are already lower than the existing elevation of the property. The homes on West Diamond Boulevard are significantly lower than the existing elevation of the site, and the same is true in West Park neighborhood located across Sand Lake Road. There's a topography map on page 23 of your packet. The shadow analysis was on page 52. There's a view angle detail on page 51 of your packet, and there's also another drawing on page 61 of your packet. Approval criteria 5 is met. The application shows a phasing for the establishment of soccer fields and a park. The timeline for playable soccer fields will determine whether the fill site is allowed to continue per the milestones plan on page 54 of your packet. Approval criteria 6 is met. The hours of operation for the land reclamation will remain the same, as well as the truck trips are not expected to change. Final use of the property for active and passive recreation is a permitted use. Construction of soccer fields and parking areas require a building permit. Approval criteria 7 is met. The site size and operations plan are suitable for land reclamation as a use. The site already has a conditional use for land reclamation and has had it for many years. Approval criteria 8 is met. The existing roads continue to be adequate. They're supposed to hold up to 20,000 vehicle trips per day. Approval criteria 9 is met. The site is located in the Anchorage Roads and Drainage Service Area, building safety service area, police and fire service areas, and the parks and rec service areas. The department's recommending approval of the application subject to conditions 1 through 19 on pages 18, 19, and 20 of your packet. The first 2 conditions of approval on page 18 are standard for just about all cases. Approval criteria, condition of approval, number 3, acceptance of any fill shall cease if soccer fields are not constructed and playable in the timeline that AS&G commits to in the milestones detail on page 54 of your packet. Condition of approval 4 requires the applicant to resolve driveway permits with state DOT. 5, resolve the paving standard for vehicle parking lots with the traffic engineer. 6, resolve the number of accessible spaces, handicap parking spaces with the traffic engineer. 7 is to revise the landscape plan to show parking lot interior landscaping. Condition of approval number 8, provide a screening detail for storage. Condition of approval 9, resolve with planning and private development the revised plans for the earthen berm along the north and east sides of the site. Provide typical sections including materials, dimensions, slopes, planting details. The toe of the slope shall remain outside of the 45-foot wide utility easement along the north property boundary. Condition of approval number 10 says that this conditional use would be valid until 2034. Conditions of approval 11 through 19 are all the same as previously approved on the previous case. Thank you for your attention. That's all I have.
Are there any questions for staff? Commissioner Ron.
Thank you through the chair, Mr. McLaughlin. Thanks for that presentation. Starting with one question, then see if other commissioners want to chime in. This is one around consistency between what I see as the petition site in the staff packet and the project site in the applicant's packet. Can you help me understand what role the R2M and B1A components of the petition site play in this case?
Yes, thank you for the question. I would like to definitely clarify that. So all 4 tracks, including the R2M and B1A tracks in the southwest corner, are all approved for land reclamation. They're sort of treated and looked at a little bit differently, only because the southwest corner was a reserve site for a school previously and had good high ground that was not historically mined, and it's receiving under this conditional use permit, or the existing one that is seeking to be extended, is receiving structural fill as future development pads. So that property is included in the existing conditional use, is carried forward in this application. They want to continue filling it with structural fill as well. The thrust of the application is talking more about these 2 larger tracts that would have changes. But there's no change, just a continuation proposed for that corner. And that corner is why the case was postponed. You were scheduled to hear this last month, but we postponed it to this month to make sure that it was abundantly clear to the Commission of the Public that they wanted to continue the conditional use for land reclamation for structural fill in the southwest corner on those 2 commercial and multifamily residential zoned parcels.
Anybody else? Will the petitioner please come forward? State and spell your name for the record.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board, and planning staff. My name is Craig Bennett, and that's B-E-N-N-E-T-T with S4 Group. Triad Engineering is here to help answer questions also, and Mr. Zins and Mr. Mormon with AS&G are here to present with me. I would like to thank staff for working with us on this amazing project. This sports park is one of the most exciting projects I've been a part of. To start, this amendment is to an existing conditional use permit. We are in agreement with all the department recommendations. As staff report states, all 9 of the approval standards are met. There are no state or municipal reviewing department objections, and as stated on page 18, the department recommends approval of this project. All good things. This started as a gravel extraction site in the 40s and became a clean fill site in the early 80s. We first presented a recreational sports park to the community back in 2017 and have met with the community many times since then. Just last year, we were before this board rezoning the site to PLI to allow for park uses. Now with the new zoning that matches both the 2040 land use plan and the West Anchorage District Plan of open space and park, we're asking for the amendment to build the park. This includes fill, updated drainage, and a time extension. And I'll add that we are still about 4 to 6 years out to complete the amount of fill that is currently approved, and would be here asking for a 10-year time extension anyway to meet the approved amount. This plan has been modified to meet the community wishes. We've added more sports fields, moved and lowered the sledding hill, added extra parking and more landscaping features. A large majority of the submitted public comments are in favor of this project. I counted at least 70 letters in support. This recreational sports park includes 70 sports fields, with one of them being a championship field. We're showing over 2 miles of multi-use public trails. This will be an incredible benefit and resource to the community. Now, I'll be happy to answer any questions in the rebuttal, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Moorman. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Ryan Moorman, M-O-R-M-A-N. I'm the operations manager for Anchorage Sand and Gravel. I'm going to talk a little bit on the essential nature of Sand Lake Pit for the economics. One, Sand Lake really serves a purpose for the municipality, the DOT, the private sector, and homeowners for building, road construction, a gamut of all activities that really keep Anchorage rolling. For us, the extension for 10 years is critical. One thing that we look at is, one, how can we keep costs low in the community? And that's for having a fill site locally. If we were to export material out of the Anchorage Bowl out to Eklutna or further out to the valley, your building costs would grow exponentially. So again, we want to really speak to the nature of the economics for the extension that we're asking for. And other than that, I'm going to turn it over. Oh, and last but not least, one thing that we are here for, which we're really excited, is the fill for fields. You know, one thing that we need to talk about is it does require a great amount of money to actually build these fields. And AS&G has worked really hard and very excited with our team, you know, to be able to say, hey, we're going to take future revenue from the future fill and roll it into the field development. You know, there's high costs of putting in wells, watering, you know, building the fields, building a hill that actually acts as a windbreak, and for our championship fields for the seeding. Other than that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Zins.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Ryan Zins. I'm Vice President, General Manager, ZINS for Anchorage Sand and Gravel. And super excited to be here today, so I appreciate you folks listening to us. This has been a long time coming. Brief history, Craig kind of talked about it, but this site and the site next to it has been a gravel extraction facility since about the 1940s. And in the early 80s is when we switched from gravel extraction mining activities to clean fill and reclamation activities. And from that time forward, we've been in front of you folks every 5 to 6 years, kind of talking about our story, progress reports as we move forward, and a lot of ideas, different concepts of what maybe the end life may look like of this project. Fast forward a number of years, in the last 5 to 6 years, this is our third time in front of you folks in the last 5 years as part of this process. So it's not quick, it's very time consuming. So the first part was to break out that 10 acres in the lower right-hand corner. So that allowed us to do mixed use residential, light commercial. And then that allowed us to address the other 66 acres, which was residential R1A. The next phase, we were here a couple years ago, met with you folks and did PLI, Public Lands and Institutions, what then allowed us to be in front of you today with this project. During that process, countless meetings with community councils, homeowners associations, neighbors, employees in the neighborhood, multiple departments, Parks and Recs, Heritage Land Bank, all ideas, concepts. We had open houses at the site, people up to our facilities, and really getting people's inputs. What would you folks like to see if it was your property, you had your druthers, you could do whatever you want? And that's where we're super excited what we came up with today, because the overwhelming issue or the comment that we kept hearing was sports fields, and most notably soccer. And I didn't realize how big of a soccer community or lack of fields we really had till we really started digging into that. And so we compiled that with some other ideas that would go out there with the hills and the undulations and the trails that will allow us to help pay for that process. So this is not quick. It's going to be a time-consuming project, but that's where we put our milestones in there to get to where we're going. Again, the fill is going to help pay for those fields. But we spent many, many hours out there looking at different areas, moving trails around, moving fields around, from inputs to different organizations and sporting areas to see where things are supposed to go. So super excited about this project. My kids are excited about the project. I can't tell you how many times we've been out there wandering around the property looking at hills and trails and fields like that. So I'll turn it over. We have an excellent team here. We got our Patrick Walter, our quality control manager, works for Anchorage Sand and Gravel, has built sports fields in the past. We got Geotechnical Advisory Committee, or Northern Geotechnical Engineers, Triad S4, all these folks have come together to put together this project. So we're very excited about it, and I appreciate everybody's time and effort and look forward to a dialogue. So we're going to save our 3 minutes when we go forward. So any questions before?
Any questions for the petitioner? Hearing none? Sorry. We do have a question. Commissioner Pullis.
I got a question for probably Triad Civil. The sledding hill, do you guys know the approximate volume of material to make that hill? A guess is fine. Just thinking about the master plan.
Through the chair, this is Brandon Marcotte with Triad, M-A-R-C-O-T-T. The estimation is in the packet. It's 900,000 yards. They're roughly about the base of the elevation now, which is what the current grading plan shows. So going up from here, it'll be the additional 900,000 yards. Yep.
Next, Commissioner Krishna.
Yeah, I have a couple of small clarifying questions. The first one is about the timeline, the project milestones. I see in a couple of places that it says 2023, construct fields 2, 3, and 4, and then 2025, open 2, 3, and 4. Was that the intention? I guess I'm curious about why, given that we're in June, that the milestones say that first phase will be done by this year.
Yes, that was the intention. So
Your mic.
there we go. Sorry, we had intended to go in front of the community council, I think in December, and the community council meeting was canceled, so they actually held in lieu of a community council meeting, a meeting with us in January, and we presented at that, and our goal was to get approved in April, and it was postponed to May and then postponed to June because as we start running into the construction seasons, that's where we start running into trouble. So the goal was to start construction at the beginning of this year, which is still our goal, is to start the construction and move forward on that. So you allow grass and fields and turf to grow. So the issue is not constructing them, it's when can the players get on there and be ready to play without destroying the sensitive root structure.
If I may, I think, I assume you'll have no objection to saying that if this application moves forward, that it sounds like you wouldn't object to us modifying it to be 2023/2024 or something like that. Just don't want us to tie this application so closely to a year timeline that we're already in the middle of and might not meet, given that that's a major kind of...
Any additional time would be greatly appreciated, especially as we get closer into the construction season, but the intention was to have them ready by 25.
All right, thank you. I have one more question, if that's okay, just because the predominant concern from our packet that we can see seems to be about the height of the hill. Could you explain a little further about your design process and why the hill has that height and why it's an integral part of the site? Anything else you want to add there?
Yeah, we had had a preliminary planning meeting, and soccer was huge. Sports fields was a big one, but another issue was we see a lot of people when they come to these soccer communities and they leave. The parents drop their kids off and go. So one of the big things that people wanted to do was be able to stay in travel around single tracks, hiking trails, overlook passes. So we've always had some sort of undulations or hill sets in there, and it's moved, and Craig can speak to this much more than I can, over the time. At one point, I think we were at 260, 285, and listening to some neighbors' inputs and some feedback, we dropped that down to 230, and we moved it centrally and located. So in our property, the most affected property user is actually us. It's going to be our lower 10 acres for our light commercial mixed residential use on that north side. So we were cognizant of where we were putting that hill as part of this process and listening to feedback and shadow studies. And so a lot of time and effort and engineering went into the design of the fields and the structures with the trails as far as how they all coalesce and tie into one another.
Okay, Commissioner Ron.
Thank you through the chair. Two questions. One, I'd appreciate your help increasing my understanding of current conditions relative to what I understand to be 800,000 cubic yards of currently approved capacity that has not yet been met. So how does that work in relation to this finished elevation of 162 feet? Understand that Sand Lake Community Council has put forward a resolution where they've noted that, and obviously that's what the current approval is. So how close are you to being able to meet that finished grade elevation, and does it take the full 800,000 or less than that, more than that?
5 years is what we would request if we were to come back for that. That's our current CUP as we push out. So the juggling act that we have with this is it's just not at the end of 4 or 5 years you're done. You have to be able to maneuver and manipulate material as incoming stuff comes in. So as you see good topsoil, you would maneuver and hold that over here, because we don't control what comes into the facility. It may be a whole bunch of good gravel, good structural fill, could be topsoil, could be trees, and so we set that stuff aside. That's why it's super important that we start this process now, so as we move forward into this, into these field constructions, that we can stage and develop the site plan as we move forward. So to answer your question, 800 is the existing CUP out to tie into the lower Diamond Boulevard.
Okay, thank you. And if I may, my follow-up is a follow-on to what I heard the applicant team talk about in terms of revenue from fill being used to, in effect, pay for this reclamation plan of establishing soccer fields. And I heard that, I think, if correctly, the 900,000 additional volume is for the hill itself. So is there a direct tie between that hill and paying for the soccer fields? Do the project economics work or not work contingent on that hill?
Yes, that's how we get to that. What became abundantly clear to us as we went through these processes and most recently is the city Parks and Rec does not want to purchase it, does not want to maintain it. And that's a big deal. So how do you pay for those fields? How do you construct a good engineered qualified field that's not doomed to failure on the first day? And that's how we pay for it, is we've tied in that hillside and the undulations to be able to pay for those fields.
Okay, thank you.
I see no more questions in the queue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, one more. Late arrival, Commissioner George.
I could talk about this all day. We're okay.
Through the chair, thank you. I'm happy to give you that opportunity. I appreciate you coming forward and all the work you've put into this. I'm a little newer to the commission, so I'm still figuring out our systems here. I had a couple of questions for you, but I first wanted to recognize your right as a private landowner to develop your property compatible with the PLI designation it has to be a private park owner. That is your right, and I appreciate that you are putting organizational resources into making this improved from where it is now. So I just want to say that.
Thank you.
And consistent with the district plan and the 2040 plan. I also appreciate your partnership with local nonprofits and organizations. I see a couple of folks who I recognize have written letters of support. You've done some groundwork there, pun intended. And I appreciate that you've listened to the community for what their needs are for this space. This isn't a public piece of land, and so you've taken the time to try and put something on it that will benefit the community. I do have some questions about some of the stuff that's in the packet here. The shadowing study that was done appears to indicate that this seems to be one of the largest concerns that were raised in a lot of the feedback that we received, indicates that on solstices there was no impact at 8 a.m., noon, and 4 p.m. But it also indicates the sun had not risen as of 8 a.m. and had already set by 4 p.m. So there's no way to actually know what that impact is. It sort of makes it look like there isn't an impact when the winter time is when our sunshine is in limited supply. And most important, I wonder if you might speak to that a little bit.
Craig, do you want to?
Sure. So the shadow study's on page 52, and it's showing, planning asked for 4 dates for the equinox and the solstice. So you got March 20th, June 21st, September 22nd, and December 21st. Typically, you just show noon, what the shadow study is at noon. I went and additionally added 8 in the morning on the 4 across the top and 4 p.m. in the evening. But then in December, the sun doesn't come up till 10 and sets at 3:40 for this location. So at those times it's dark. But all the times, March, June, and September, the shadow doesn't leave the site. And the actual hill is very gentle grades. When we say hill, if you look at one page before, 51, it kind of gives a elevation detail of what the hill actually looks like from the side. And it's a pretty gentle hill. And because of that, there isn't shadows that go onto the neighboring properties.
Okay. May I continue? Through the chair, thank you for that. Maybe it would be more helpful to know how much or how long the shadow would shorten a day on the solstice, for instance. And it's one thing to have a hill block the entire sun out, but there is a horizon below the sun. And if the sun is just barely peeking over the hill, and that's the daylight you get, I mean, I suppose that shows up in the study, but perhaps that might be a concern or something to bear in mind. I know that the packet shows that there's an 8-foot berm at the northern edge of the property. Does that increase the elevation of the base where the hill would be on, or raise the elevation of the proposed development, or is it still at 162 at that point?
So the berm is just the berm along the north, and there is landscaping on top of it. And that 8-foot berm will block the view if you're standing on the north property line. And that berm doesn't affect anything else on the site elevation-wise, but it does. And we are required to do buffer landscaping on the north and east anyway. And the landscaping will be on and around the berm, which adds an extra layer of screening to the site.
Thank you. And then 2 last questions. One, I see that there was hydrology work done. There were some concerns in some of the letters that were written about folks unsure if this would impact wells or septics nearby. Could you just put on the record the determination from that? And then if you've had anyone, I see there's a lot of demand for soccer, but is there a commensurate demand for sledding hill, or, I played baseball. I was more of a baseball guy myself, but I don't want to have to declare any conflicts, so I'll just say, what was the compelling reason to have soccer fields, 7 Olympic-sized soccer fields, and a sledding hill? How did you come to this? Thank you.
You want to speak to soccer fields?
Sure. Yeah, the biggest thing was undulations, and a huge one was wind breaks. And that's when you look at your berms on that north side too. So you try to contain your soccer balls within the fields, but the berm, the big benefit of the sledding hill where it's at is as it relates to soccer, is it helps break at least approximately 60% from the top wind speed when it comes down. And that area does get pretty windy over there, walking around, especially in the afternoon. So that was a big deal. And then, page 58 is our wind study analysis. And that was another thing that we heard lots of feedback about is we want a place to go walk around and sights and views, and that's where we have, different lookout sites and integrated that into the site. I would say the one thing I've heard a lot is, oh, my private park or my seeker park, you're talking about my park, so, well, this is what I would like, and I wouldn't like that so much. So it's kind of coalescing all of those ideas into something cohesive that works to everybody's kind of benefit and need. And Sledding Hill was a big one.
Thank you.
And then, was your question on drainage?
Through the chair, hydrology.
Hydrology. I'll let Brandon speak to that.
Yes, again, through the chair. There's a letter in your packet on page 82 from Dave Braley, the hydrologist on the team, and I can summarize for you here as well. It basically states the proposed change of the elevation in the grading plan will not affect the quantity of surface runoff directed to the on-site stormwater detention basin, which is separated from drinking water aquifers by the cohesive facies of the Bootlegger Cove Foundation. Annual monitoring of perched aquifer wells indicates stable conditions over the past decade, during which the overall site drainage has remained constant. As a result, no impacts to subsurface hydrology are anticipated. That was from January of this year.
Thank you.
All right, I think we are actually done with questions now. And next, we will open it up to the public. Anyone wishing to testify, please come forward. You're part of the public. Yeah, that's the public. You can come forward. Yes. Okay. These are exactly what's in the packet?
Exactly, yes. Did you read it all? I did. Thank you. My name is Frank Rass.
You need to turn the mic on, and then you will receive 5 minutes if can you clarify that you are representing the Sand Lake Community Council?
Yes, I'm the permits.
Turn the mic on.
It's the green.
I'm the permits chair for the Sand Lake Community Council.
Please spell your name. State your name and spell it for the record.
Frank Rast, R-A-S-T. I'm a retired engineer and 25-year area resident, actually right up the street from the fill site. Full disclosure, I did not know Andre was on the commission. Okay, I did meet with Andre. I did not know he was on the commission. That full disclosure. The council has a number of disputes, inaccuracies in the report. First, fill option for 10 additional years. Then 2015, the promise was coming back every 5 years. It's in our resolution. Every 5 years, they were to come back and talk to the community. The 2015 amendment was a massive. They raised the fill heights 45 feet. They promised in 2015 it was going to be flat soccer fields. There was no hill. That was never talked about. It was going to be flat. And it was going to step down, see, because to meet the 2040 comp plan to maintain the natural beauty, the mountains, the site stepped down, 162 to 142. This is an 88-foot hill, ladies and gentlemen. From 142 to 230, that's 88 feet. So it straddles the bench. The purpose of the bench was the 2040 comp plan says to maintain the natural beauty. So you can see here on the visual site analysis, there's some properties over a mile away that are going to be seeing this sledding hill. They only notified people within 500 feet of the site. These people a mile away, they have no idea what's going on. They haven't been notified. That's not good public policy. 10 years? If the fields aren't playable, there's no standard for playable. I'm an engineer. I like standards. Who decides what's playable? They want 10 years. They agreed to 5 years in 2015. Flat, soccer, playable. It might be playable now. So they want, in exchange, to add a money mound. So I call it money mound. For Bismarck, North Dakota. That's where their headquarters is now, Bismarck. That's what changed since 2015. They're not local anymore. They don't care about the community. They care about the bottom line. See, they can't see the sledding hill from Bismarck. They can see the balance sheet. 900,000 yards, 6.3 million, added to the balance sheet. But they promised in 2015, flat at 612, or 162, I'm sorry, 162, slope down to 142, maintain the natural beauty. They said they got 4 to 6 years of capacity left on the existing permit. There's no reconciliation if you give them 10 years. That's a get out of jail free card. The fields aren't playable. It's our opinion, there's no standard. We'll keep building our money hill. We've got 10 years. We'll work it out. With the 5 years, 2029, the site won't be filled to what was approved in 2015. Flat field. You got 5 years to work it out with the public. These people 2 miles away, they don't know what's going on. They count on the Planning and Zoning Commission to protect the public, not the interests of a private company based in Bismarck, North Dakota. So I take exception where the staff says the Community Council opposes the application. That's inaccurate. We support soccer fields. But soccer fields are flat. The gentle slope, that's a 4-to-1 slope. Open space, 4-to-1. You play Frisbee on a 4-to-1 slope? That's stretching what open space is. But the 24 comp plan Community Valley is natural beauty and setting, unspoiled views, built in harmony with our natural resources and natural beauty. This is an eyesore. It's a money mound for Bismarck. They need this to make it work. Folks, do the math. Over 2 million yards since 2015. $7 a yard.
Your time is up.
Okay, thank you.
Let me see if we have any questions for you. Thank you, no questions. Please state your name and spell it for the record.
All right, good evening. My name is Terry Hennessy, Terry, Hennessey. I've lived in Sand Lake area, just north of the 75 acres for 68 years. Their timeline is a little off, since I watched the forest be clear-cut in those 75 acres, put into slag piles, burned. I've watched the overburden be removed and the gravel be mined, and also on the west side, the gravel be mined from the potato fields. I've been there that long to see all those changes, and I've seen the fill that they put in and how much. And the only thing I oppose this, I oppose the new requirements. I oppose the 82-foot high sled hill. I don't oppose a pavilion at all. I don't oppose parking lots. I don't oppose soccer fields. I'm all for it. But what we have there right now is sufficient to build soccer fields. And the questions I have is, in all the time that they've mined the gravel, and they filled it back in, and they've had a variant, how many years ago, to add an extra 20 feet height of fill on those 75 acres. I believe they've made enough money off of those 75 acres, they could build the soccer fields and pavilions and parking lots right now without any additional revenue. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? None? Seeing none? Next public testifier.
Good evening. My name is Brian Harton, last name Harten. And sorry, I don't have very many prepared remarks. I only found out about this hearing today. And I just wanted to come and voice my strong support for this project. AS&G provides a service, essentially a utility, to every contractor and in Anchorage. Everybody uses it. Every home builder, every commercial builder, every utility company, the MOA themselves, State of Alaska, NSTAR gas utilities. We see them in there all day long, every day. If we're forced to haul our spoil material to Eagle River or the Valley, it's going to add tremendous cost to every single home built in the Anchorage Bowl. You know, you hear a lot of people talking about affordability and homelessness, a big problem. If AS&G closes this dump site prematurely, you're going to see a tremendous increase in the cost of your average home. So previous petitioner asked that we do the math. Well, I've done a little bit of math on this. Every home has I'm sorry, I'm a civil contractor as well as a civil engineer. I'm not retired. I hope to be retired soon, but I'm licensed and practicing in the state of Alaska as both an engineer and a contractor. So every project I do, from a 9,000 square foot lot to a 5-acre lot, has spoil that needs to be hauled off. The smallest project might need 10 loads. Larger projects up to 50 to 100. Currently, average numbers, if it's an hour round trip plus the dump fees, is $250 a load. If we have to haul out to Eagle River, you can bump that up to $800. So for 10 loads, you've got an average of $2,500 currently, up to $8,000. 25 loads, you go from $5,000 to $16,000. Larger projects of 50 loads, $12,000, all the way up to $40,000. So this starts to add up quick. Used to be in the 80s when Sand Lake first came about, you could haul spoil to neighboring properties that had holes or needed fill. But now anything over 5 loads, you've got to get engineering, fill and grade permit, surveying. So that's off the table. So this is our only option for getting rid of clean fill that we don't need on our projects. With regards to Bismarck or anything, I'll assure everybody, AS&G is a local company. I've seen them, they care for the community, they care for their clients, care for their contractor clients, and all of them work and live in Anchorage. So it's about as local as it gets. And that's about all I have.
Perfect timing. Is there any questions from the commission? I see none. Well, next.
Thank you.
Sorry, we got a question. Commissioner Ron.
Thank you, the Chair. Mr. Hartner, I appreciate you coming down tonight and sharing your perspective and your professional insights. One of the questions I have around this site is, yes, its importance, but I question in that the durability of the situation. And my question to you is, if in 5 years AS&G said, well, we've changed plans slightly, we would like to keep, accepting fill, would you be here testifying for the exact same reason, that there's no other place to take the fill? And I guess it's kind of a, do we deal with it today, or do we deal with it in 5 years, or do we deal with it in 10 years? Maybe all of the above.
Right.
So can you kind of speak to that in a broader context?
So if I understand your question is, I'm here saying that this is a needed asset, and if in 5 years they say it's going to close down, what do we do? I mean, I'm trying to prolong the inevitable. I know Sand Lake's going to fill up eventually, and we're going to have budgets and give our clients time to acquiesce to the higher costs that that's going to endure. I wish nobody had built West Park subdivision and we could be filling that hole in. I think there was more money to be made there than building houses. But yeah, so everything's eventual, but for right now, I'd like to extend this as long as possible, not only for my clients, but for the community as a whole. Every house built in Anchorage, except for maybe on the Far East side, uses this facility.
Thank you for your response.
I see no more questions.
Thank you.
Currently. Next, please state your name and spell it.
Make sure this thing's on. My name is Scott Hickox, spelled Hickkox, and I am here to represent Cook Inlet Soccer Club as the executive director. And I want to thank you, obviously, for taking the time to hear from us. Our soccer club has been around since 1982, and our primary mission is to obviously develop kids' love of sport and get them passionate about doing something and hopefully be successful. And that success is not just to the soccer field, but it's also success in life, and that is our major mission. It's academic, it's business, it's athletics. When I got involved with soccer here in Alaska about 7 years ago, and I can speak to the need for additional soccer fields. I can speak to the challenges of the fields we have and the maintenance and all of the things that everybody has concerns about. When AS&G proposed this and came to us with this, it's like everything else over the past probably 30, 50, 100 years. Change is difficult. Change is hard for soccer clubs, change is hard for communities, change is hard for neighborhoods, and change is particularly hard when it's close. One thing I can say is that the change that this would create is beneficial to well over 1,000 families, and particularly probably 1,000 to 1,500 kids on an annual basis. And that is just a sort of a low estimate of the number of kids that are served playing soccer in South Central. Doesn't include traveling teams, it doesn't include Fairbanks or Southeast, it doesn't include the peninsula. AS&G's willingness to help make this happen requires an economic input. Their willingness to put their money in, which means we as a community have to be willing to compromise some things. And that's part of change, which is compromise. And as a soccer community, we have to be willing to recognize that while Cook Inlet is going to be a major beneficiary of this, it's really the bigger picture, which is the entire state community that benefits. With our ability to develop players, to host things, to share that space with other clubs, we're not just the primary beneficiary, it's the neighborhood, it's Anchorage, it's the state. And so from our perspective, what's really happening here is it's a change in how we view our open spaces. And I would welcome the idea that, yes, over time things do change, and yes, there's going to be concerns, and 5 years from now there may be additional things that come up. I think that's process that we all accept on any level with any project. Nobody can predict the future. But what we can do is try and be faithful to the ideas and stand behind the intent. And I think that's where we're at with this project. And personally, I would like to see it go forward, and I would like to see it come to fruition, because at the end of the day, it's a benefit to the community. It's not just an economic benefit, it's a social benefit, it's an athletic benefit, which usually indicates there's going to be an academic benefit. When everybody ties in and we start to see this bigger picture rather than just isolated individuals or one particular economic situation, I think when we step back and look at that, we as a community have to say to ourselves, this perhaps is the best thing moving forward for this particular location. With that, I would obviously like to thank you for the time and your willingness to hear us out. I'd like to thank AS&G for coming here and supporting this, because honestly, without this, new fields, maintenance of existing fields is incredibly challenging. We have seen over time lots of injuries. We've seen attrition in fields that are playable. And so this perhaps would ease that burden and make things a little bit better, again, for a broader community. And with that, I'll yield the rest of my time and say thank you.
We do have questions in the queue. If other commissioners have questions, please get them in.
Sure.
But Commissioner Krishna.
Thank you. I do have one question about kind of the long-term suitability of these fields. We do have information in our packet. I'm looking at page 80 of our packet from geotechnical engineering, talking about keeping the fields flat is unlikely to be economically feasible, right? So I'm curious about Cook Inlet Soccer Club's position on kind of maintenance and whether you feel that these fields will be of long-term benefit to your community and the broader kind of Anchorage area.
I think in order for it to be a benefit long-term, we have to go into this with eyes wide open with a plan for maintenance. We have to, from day one, which is already past, have ideas about how to develop accounts, money, sponsorships to maintain those fields. We have seen, and I have seen, other fields in this community that were put out. They were flat, they were great fields, and they have fallen to disrepair. And now they are, I don't want to say blight, but challenging. And this is where we come from, which is we have to take a step back and say, can we learn from what's happened before? And through that, we now say the most important next step for us is not just getting them out there and open, it's a plan to keep them open. So yes, get them built, get the facility going, but now it's the plan to maintain it and keep it a quality top-rate facility. So yes, I cannot speak specifically to what it is because that has yet to be developed, but what I can say is, for me as the executive director, that's my primary mission moving forward. How do we do that in an economically sustainable way? And there's lots of different options. You can rotate fields, you can shut things down, you can raise money, but in the end, there's no getting around it. There will need to be maintenance to keep the fields playable at a high level. I hope that answered your question.
Yes.
I have one question. Is Cook Inlet Soccer going to be responsible for maintaining the fields, or would that be the petitioner?
I'm going to yield to the petitioner, and I'll tell you why.
I can ask again at their rebuttal.
Okay.
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next. Again, please state your name and spell it.
Yes, good evening. I'm Dylan Faber, F-A-B-E-R. I appreciate you all being here on this sunny June summer day. I know it's difficult to be in a room like this. I'm speaking as a community member, as a vice president of Cook Inlet Soccer Club on the board, as a coach, most importantly. And I think we, in the discussions earlier amongst the commission, as everybody here has a connection to sports. Everybody's kids have probably played. Everybody sees that passion of those young athletes when they're out there competing, playing in tournaments like the one this past weekend, the tears that happened at the finals, the smiles that happened with the championships. And those are the things that make it all worth it for us and the reasons why we show up to these things, why we coach, why we want to help improve the community and the quality of fields that are out there. But the key to all of that is having places to develop these young folks, safe places where they can learn the skills that they need to be able to progress in sport. And that's a challenge that we have across Alaska. In Anchorage is field challenges. Believe it or not, not even the turf fields are suitable sometimes. My team was out at a game out at Clark Middle School. The refs almost didn't let us play because there was a sinkhole in it. And so I'd like to say that we are extremely excited by AS&G's prospects to develop this field for the greater community. We're extremely supportive of this project site plan. We've been collaborating very closely with them as a soccer club and with them as community members, and we recognize that this is a very expensive project, and we appreciate their willingness to put their money where their mouth is and to come up with an economically feasible way to develop these soccer fields for the community. Part of it, one of the exciting things of the sledding hill component of it, also makes it multi-use year-round. So you don't just have it a blank space covered in snow in the winter. You can go out there, sledding hill. I was talking to Nordic skiing community. They're interested in the trails. And so overall, we're extremely excited by the lineup, the setup, and we're extremely grateful to Anchorage Sand and Gravel for being willing to partner with us on this for the greater benefit of the community and soccer community, all in sports and youth development as a whole. In addition to that, the need for new fields, we have a facility Cook Inlet's been operating at since probably the 80s. That's going to be coming offline due to a road project. So the increase for soccer fields is just going up. We've loved our fields to death, and we're excited to hopefully continue progressing on with this project in the next couple of years with ASNG. So I yield my time and appreciate you all being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Please state your name and spell it.
My name is Alex Creaky, ALEXCRIQUA. I'm 12 years old and I've been playing on Cook Inlet soccer team since I was 4. I started on a rec team and am now playing on one of the best Cook Inlet soccer teams for 2010 in Alaska. We have won state cup for the last 2 years and we're going again this year. I'm so excited for the possibility of new soccer fields. It is hard for me and my friends to find well-kept fields that are safe to play on. Me and many of my teammates have tripped and almost injured ourselves on divots and holes on the fields. My teammates and I often meet up to scrimmage and play together on fields in Anchorage. It's hard to find an unused safe field, especially one that is grass. These new fields will enable me and my friends to practice and to get better so that we can compete in tournaments and competitions outside of the state of Alaska. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, my name is Molly Brown. That was my son. Very proud mom moment for me. My Molly is M-O-L-L-Y, Brown, like the color, B-R-O-W-N. I wear a lot of hats, like we all do. I'm a property owner, a taxpayer. I'm an attorney by practice. I'm also a volunteer on the Cook Inlet Board of Directors. But I'm here today to speak about being a soccer mom. And a chauffeur of that kid back there who isn't lying when he says it's hard to find a field to play on. I'm often loading up his soccer rebounder to try to, drive him to practice on a field. There are hardly any grass fields that we can find near our house. We're in South Anchorage. The elementary schools are available, but like Alex said, they're not sometimes safe and they're sometimes just unplayable. And the turf fields at the high schools are great, but those are often used by baseball players and football players and runners and co-ed league soccer players as well. I just spent a weekend at Kincaid with our lovely 42-degree summer weather, winds at 30 miles per hour. Every single field there is filled from 7:30 in the morning until 8 o'clock at night. I'm not saying anything that you haven't already read about in your packet, and I looked at some of those letters and I agree wholeheartedly with all of the kids and the parents of soccer players who, describe the need for soccer fields. But I also think it's important that as somebody who grew up here, didn't play soccer, was a swimmer, but who values, I think what Commissioner Strike said is like the sport, the bond that brings us all together. I mean, my child plays on a team with kids from all over Anchorage, and they know each other because they've been playing together since they were 5. And they will play together probably until they all go to their different high schools, but they will still know and love each other and respect each other, and I love that for him. But I also love that he's growing up in a place where being outside and being busy and, being in our great outdoor space is valued. It's why I moved back here after going to law school. It's why my husband moved here from Kansas, so that he could be part of this type of a community. And it's hopefully, if we put the importance of these fields and the importance of developing parks. And I have so much appreciation for a private company, making that type of commitment to the city. Hopefully what that means is that our kids will come back and raise their kids here because that's what, that to me is what this is all about. So thank you for your time. Thank you for considering this, and I know it takes a lot of time, and you had to read a lot of pages of paper, 331, I think, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, please state your name and spell it.
Hello, my name is Joseph Dudley, Josephudley. I am a member of the Sand Lake community, actually. I live about a block and a half away from the proposed fields. I am a big proponent. We already use the field. Sorry, guys. We are there, 2 to 3 times a week already. We walk dogs out there. We go and play out there. When the grass gets tall, we play hide and seek in the field. So to us, it's a park already. To see it further developed so that we can use it would be fantastic. We also walk down to Jade Field, where we're worried about tripping and falling while we're playing soccer because of all the holes. To see somebody maybe take care of the field, because so far I haven't seen the city do a ton of proper maintenance on their fields in my 20 years here. I would really like to see maybe Cook Inlet give it a try if they're going to actually be able to maintain it. And I would be a part of it because, as a member of the Cook Inlet Club, actually, my kids play for them. So it's twofold for me and sometimes threefold. I grew up actually snow machining out there, which you're not supposed to do, but we tend to break the rules a little bit in that neighborhood. So it's always been a usable space for us. I would love to see it continued. The sledding hill is a great idea. Right now we have to go down to, different areas of the neighborhood to get onto a sledding hill. So I love the idea of just going over there and being able to pile onto it. Another thing is the trail system would be super beneficial for us because right now we got to go down to Diamond, walk along Diamond, which I don't want my children walking along, and then you've got to cross Sand Lake over there just to walk a loop back to the house. So you're crossing Sand Lake twice and riding along Diamond, which is not something I enjoy doing with a 4-year-old learning how to ride a bike. If I could walk straight to a park system without ever crossing a busy road, it would make my day and my wife's as well. So I'm a big fan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions?
I see no questions.
Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, thank you for the opportunity to address you. My name is Bill Popp, P-O-P-P. I'm President and CEO of the Anchorage Economic Development Corporation. I speak to you tonight in support of this project. I speak to it not so much from the technical perspectives of soil conditions or hydrology or the many other technical issues that you need to address this evening as you make your deliberations on whether or not to approve this application. I speak to it more for the fact that you are also in your decision process, if you approve this, contributing to the quality of place, in improving the quality of place in Anchorage, which makes us more competitive for attracting workforce and which is helping the economy of Anchorage in the long term. It's not going to solve all of our problems, but it's a small but important gesture and move forward towards improving the attractiveness of Anchorage to working age adults who are also of child-rearing years, who are outside of our city right now, of which we are having a diminishing supply of. We are losing working age adults in our city at a rate that is unprecedented in the history of our city. We have lost 15,000 18 to 64-year-olds just in the last decade. That is why we are seeing incredible problems with labor force issues in our city, our inability to fill jobs that are going unfilled. We estimate that there's approximately 2 to 2.5 many times as many jobs being offered in our city as there are seeking to pursue those jobs. It is a very difficult circumstance nationally, and this is a situation that we have to recognize. We are in a competition for attracting workforce to our city, and quality of place, quality of life, quality elements such as this important project that would offer many new facets to create a broader range of offerings to our community for people to consider when they are thinking about where they want to move to, where they want to live, where they want to stay. This project represents an important step forward in helping to advance the quality of place in Anchorage. Again, I'm not trying to make this sound like a silver bullet solution to all of our problems. It is a small step towards a long journey of turning Anchorage around from the current circumstances that it finds itself in over the last decade, and with projections looking like it's going to continue in this trend unless we start taking serious steps towards reinvesting in ourselves, and especially finding those great opportunities when we can do it in a public and private partnership. with having a good company stepping forward, saying that they want to invest in our community and the quality of place, and providing assets and doing the work to help improve one small part of Anchorage that will benefit the entire city. So I would hope that you would consider those factors in your decision-making process tonight, and I urge support, and I'm happy to answer any questions from the members of the commission.
I see a question from Commissioner Strike and another in the queue, so don't go anywhere.
Mr. Pop, thank you for those comments. And as I've listened to the testimony, as I've gone through this petition, I go back 10 years ago when I first had Sand Lake come before this commission. And if you'd asked me 10 years ago, this project, when filled, when this pit area was filled, it was going to be a park. They come before the commission, and it's still going to be a park. Then soccer comes in. Now we're going to have soccer fields. So this project with soccer fields and the park and the giving back into the community, that's been around and been talked about for at least 10 years that I'm aware. So this isn't a new project. The soccer fields are not a new revelation to say, we're going to put soccer fields here. What's before us here is a new proposal to say, let us extend the life of the pit, let us put more fill in, and oh, by the way, we're going to use the money from that pit to do what we said we were going to do all along. So from the soccer perspective, all for it. What I'm going to query back to the petitioner is, when's the pit filled? There should be soccer fields there now. Instead, as one individual was testifying, we're going a little higher, now we're going to put a sledding hill. The sledding hill was never envisioned 10 years ago when I first heard these projects, that I recall. A lot of new aspects coming in. And so, when is the pit going to be filled? What's the drop-off date? Now, the new name here, Cook Inlet Soccer, great organization, love them. They weren't mentioned 5 years ago. They're a new entity into the equation here, which I guess I push back to the petitioner again. You have an association behind you for this growth, but we were always identified these as soccer fields. It went to PLI, the land did. So there's a lot of questions out there to say, when's the pit filled and how come we don't have soccer fields out there now? And that's what I'm going to push back. So along your line, it was always going to be public lands, it was always going to be a park, it was always going to be out there for the kids. That's always been a vision out here for at least the 10 years I've been on this commission. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I don't want to enter into debate, and I hope I didn't miss a question.
No.
Okay.
I was wondering if there was a question in there myself. Commissioner Ron, do you have a question?
I will form it in the phrase of a question, but I can't say it's answerable. Through the chair, Mr. Pop, I really appreciate the work that you do with AEDC, and one of the things that I do appreciate in your role and that of your organization is that you seem to communicate to the community the importance of data-driven decision-making.
Yes, sir.
And so my question to you is on that element of data supporting the arguments that we're hearing today. A lot of anecdotal information being shared about need of soccer fields. So part A to the question would be, has AEDC or anyone to your knowledge actually done a study to assess in terms of need-based analysis for what's best for the community at this site? Question B is also around data, and that is, could you comment around the importance of having local fill to, as we've heard, drive down the cost of construction in Anchorage?
As far as a study for the site, no, sir. We do not have a study that I'm aware of, and quite frankly, I'd be surprised if there were one. We tend to study much larger projects, and we tend to study overarching needs, but we don't tend to get into individual project studies that I see in the frequency that a lot of people expect them to be. So in terms of that question, no, sir, not that I'm aware of. In terms of the costs of construction in Anchorage, every single chit that we can bring to the table and put it down to either stave off or drive down increasing costs over time is critical. A 5-year window may not seem like that big of a deal. But when we are talking about the challenges that we are having in the cost of construction in Anchorage, there's no one silver bullet solution to this. We have a lot of issues related to supply chain. We have an insane inflationary cycle in labor, which is not going to be solved by anything that we talk about here tonight, other than the fact that we are going to be able to potentially attract more people here, and perhaps we're going to get a few more soccer-oriented families moving here. That could be one of the things, but my view is that we need to throw every possible chit on the table that we can. So when a professional contractor and civil engineer stands at this microphone and tells you his cost estimates, which admittedly are his perspective, but I have a feeling you would get similar responses from other civil engineers in the community if you were to bring them before you. And it's an opportunity to help, even if it is only for 5 more years, put off a significant spike in cost based on the testimony I heard previously. And I would reference that that's an opportunity.
I see no more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the commission.
Please state your name and spell it for the record.
Yes, my name is Carrie Skinner, and that's Skinner. And so I am a resident of the Sand Lake area. I moved specifically because I wanted to be in that area. I grew up in Anchorage. And I would welcome the opportunity to develop this corner into community space for all of Anchorage to enjoy. So as we've seen from the success of nearby Kincaid Park, we are a community that likes to utilize the outdoors, even with allergies. My family are avid Kincaid Park users throughout the year, and I've seen the impact the community has on the park. To that extent, the parking for events at Kincaid has become troublesome, and another facility in the area would alleviate these bottlenecks so that more individuals may be able to recreate. For example, junior high and high school ski races and junior Nordic skiing, which has over 1,000 kids in the program, can take up much of Kincaid's resources, and leaving the common citizen without an option that could easily be found in this new sports park. So living in the area, a development such as this would elevate our neighborhood, it would have positive environmental effects, and would be a good long-term solution for this space. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. See no questions. Hello, please state your name and spell it for the record.
Yeah, my name's Ashley Bukowski, B as in boy, UKOWSKI. Sorry, I'm really nervous. Hey, my name's Ashley. I currently live on Seacliff. This is on the north edge of the AS&G fill site. We purchased our home back in 2020, and we did a lot of research. A deal breaker for me was having a view of the mountains, and for my husband, it was a yard for the dogs. So part of our offer was actually what is that land going to become, because the view is amazing. And we heard back from the city that it planned to be soccer fields. And so we knew that, and we put an offer on our home knowing that. I went to the recent community council meeting, and we heard about this 6-story sledding hill that's now going to block this killer view that I moved to this neighborhood for. I did look at the studies of the shade that were presented, and I agree with it, but you're not going to see the sunrise anymore. That's going to be blocked the whole entire day coming up. As far as the wind, the sledding hill is not going to block the wind. It winds there all the time. But if you look at this map, it's only going to block maybe one field. So to me, it's not even a legitimate part of the plan. I'm also just a little concerned, only the houses within 500 feet were notified. We happen to be the second house from the field, so we were notified, but our neighbors weren't, and they're the third house. They're right there. They're going to be impacted just as much as I am. I just wanted to say we pay property taxes each year. We kind of rely on you guys to do what's best for the public, not so much the interest of private companies. And we agree. I love the sports fields. I think the park's going to be great. We love to walk our dog up there also. We do go up there quite a bit. It's a great piece of land, and I support that. I just don't support this big sledding hill going there. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no questions. Hello.
Howdy. My name is Ryan Greef, Greeff. I also live in the Sand Lake neighborhood. I live off of 82nd. We can hear the noise from the fill operation, the trucks running on Sand Lake back and forth. I think Commissioner Strike nailed it. I keep hearing the number 5 years thrown around, but it's not really 5 years. It's another 15 years We're talking the additional time that's under the existing permit, 4 to 6 years, and then we're talking for another 10 years. So we're talking about another 16 years. I see these guys shaking their head at me, of impact to the neighbors. 16 years. These guys have been at it for, I might have heard varying numbers here, since the 40s, the 60s. This thing has been a cash cow that they've been milking for a long time, taking all the resources out and then filling it back up, which brings me to the fill is not structural. So the idea of maintaining soccer fields on a slope or on a base of tree stumps, that stuff is going to be under constant flux. It's going to be settling. Every year it's going to settle. So who's going to maintain it? Cook Inlet? Why aren't they maintaining the existing fields that I keep hearing about that are unplayable, full of holes? Why aren't we maintaining the fields that we have? So, what else? The demographics of the Sand Lake area have changed quite a bit with the development of South Park, whatever it's called. So there's hundreds of more homes down there now than there were. And this feels like a bait and switch. You know, we went from reviewing this plan every 5 years to now asking for an additional 10 for a total of somewhere in the 14, 15, 16 year range. So as Frank said, the community council does not support this. We do not support the hill. Everybody supports soccer fields. Build soccer fields. Do it now. We don't support the hill and the additional volume. Last time I was at the pit, the cost was $9 a yard. So if we're doing some basic math here, 800,000 yards left. That's around $7 million. The additional 900,000 yards that they're asking for is another $8 million. So this thing is a huge cash cow, and I think that's what's motivating the hill. So let's build the soccer fields, not the hill. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to testify? Would the petition, seeing none, we will have the petitioner give their rebuttal. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'll try to go quick, and then Craig can kick off. So first off, a couple of things I'd like to address. 85 years. We're celebrating 85 years this year. Welcome everybody, come to our open house off of Clat. It's a big deal. We have it every 3 to 5 years, so please come down this Saturday. Everyone's welcome. We do tours through our facilities, and we're very proud on what we do. We're a union company that has generational union employees. Not many people can say that. We have a lot of long-term employees. I'm what I used to think was a young guy. Now I'm the old guy. I've been there for over 15 years. So had followed people 45 years, my predecessor. Another thing I'd like to talk to real briefly is ideas. Mr. Strike, is a lot of this has been concept and ideas. And so this is private land. Here's some ideas. City has not come forward. City doesn't want anything to do with open space. They don't want to pay for anything. They don't want to pay maintenance. So this is where we come up with the 10 years. It's 2034 with milestones to address those things. So we found Cook Inlet. They're in need of fields, and so they maintain them. Which leads me to another question too. There was a question on field stability. So that on page 80 was kind of taken out of context, and the author of that report can speak more to that themselves. But what that was talking about, economically feasible, is starting over from scratch, building a prism, going down 30, 40 feet with good fill fabric so you never have to touch the field again. What we do is we build in lifts of 12 inches, and we're going to go down and build those fields so where you don't just put in gravel and dirt or sticks and put seed down. You're going to structure them, and then you maintain them. So yes, things will settle, but you don't defer maintenance. You take care of maintenance as you go forward. When you start deferring stuff, that's when you have massive capital projects. If somebody were to give you a car and you don't touch it for 30 years, are you mad at the person that gave you the car? You got to change the oil, you got to change the tires. That's just how it works. Craig, is there anything I missed?
We can answer a bunch of the questions, but I just want to restate that we agree to all the department recommendations. All 9 standards of approval are met. There are no agency objections, and the department does recommend approval. I know there's a bunch of questions, and I can, or the team can address them as we move forward.
I would like to say one other thing. The previous owner, 93 years old, still has an office next to mine in the building. And I talk to him on a regular basis, talk to him on Friday. So he doesn't get around as much as he used to, but he's still there, and he has been there since '64. So we're here, and we're proud to partner with Cook Inlet on this project.
Okay, that's all your time. I do have questions in the queue. Commissioner George.
Thank you to the chair. Thank you to the petitioners. This is a dense one here. You've done a lot of work, like I said before, on this. Couple of things. I just want to note that you're not required to put in sports facilities and stadiums and improvements by any agreement or legal requirement. Is that correct? So you're here because your company isn't a cold, heartless company from another state that would simply reclaim this to the minimum amount legally required. This is above and beyond what you're required. Is that correct?
I feel like this is a softball, but yes.
It is. Don't worry. There's other pitches. But I just want to get that on the record that, I've never been to Bismarck. I'm sure it's lovely. But I do recognize that you are a local company. At the same time, I think that we do have to take a lot of the concerns that are brought before us and weigh the merits of those. But I also want to keep forefront that your company has committed to an improvement. And this is a question you can defer answering it if you want to. There's a lifespan to this development, and eventually there will be facilities here, fields, whatever. Is there any contemplation that this will remain in your private ownership? Or will there be some other entity, government or otherwise, responsible for its maintenance and upkeep someday? And the reason I ask is if this is something that the municipality may someday be responsible for, is this our opportunity to weigh in? And that may be very premature, but I imagine as private property, it would continue to be taxed. So any contemplation for the long term of this property? Thank you.
Yes, it is going to remain in our ownership at the end of it. And that's where we come through as users of the field. So you have Cook Inlet, who's going to maintain those fields as they go forward on the north section. Now, as we start bringing other fields on, so we start looking, is there coalitions, is there not-for-profits, how do we actually do this? But that's a little bit cart before the horse. It could be all Cook Inlet, we're not quite sure yet, but what we've dedicated is those first fields in the north as we slowly move through our milestones.
And just last, one observation about the sledding hill, maybe because I was a problematic child. I see it has 4 sides with a gentle elevation for the sledding hill and 3 not so gentle elevations. Is there an expectation that only the gentle elevation will be used? And what's to keep folks unsupervised from going the other direction? Just food for thought, maybe.
The slopes are, I think the steepest slope is, 1 to 3, 1 to 4, so even the steep sides aren't excessively steep. But the intent is to slide down to the north with going over to the soccer fields as the run out.
Thank you.
Next we have Commissioner Strike in the queue.
Thank you. The previous commissioner rose a aha moment that I have. We've got a plan before us that if the commission through the assembly agree to this extension, you've presented a plan, we're going to build these soccer fields. What if you don't? What's your contractual commitment to do what you say you're going to do? What's to prevent you from going, economics have changed, we're going to build 2 fields?
Yes, sir. If you, through the chair, if you look at page 41 and 54, there's milestones. So if soccer fields aren't built, the planning department will say no more fill. They have to be built to progress the property. I now, I guess, defer that back to staff to confirm that.
But we've had milestones for the last 10 years. We've had milestones, we've had deadlines, we've had, now we keep moving the pit up, increasing it, more fill, we're gonna change this and move this over, and here's our final development plan. Let me just pose a question. Is this a situation where the city, in order to protect the parties involved, i.e. the recipients and so forth, should there be a performance bond to lock in this commitment? Otherwise, I'm not seeing a contractual, I see a lot of ways out. I see a lot of ways to go. Economics have dictated the change. Yes, we missed a deadline. It gets extended, it gets pushed.
To start off answering that, we have to come back every typically 5 to 10 years for a time extension. It's just how fill operations work. Typically, it's 5 or 10 years, and you just have to come back. And planning has asked us with these milestones, and certain fields have to come on within a certain time frame, or the fill operation ceases. So those are the milestones, and that's the, I guess, insurance that the board.
And I agree.
Okay.
And in the past, it's been every 5 years, but this one now is 10 years.
There's been 10 years before also.
This request before us today is for 10 years.
Correct.
So based on your statement there, would a condition be acceptable? Maybe we come back in 2 years and comes back before this commission. I'm concerned that there's nothing to hold your feet to the fire.
I think the milestones holds our feet to the fire. If we don't build them, planning department says cease, and I'll let staff.
Yeah, but you got the use of the pit, and you got the increase, and you got everything else you did, and
that we would have to stop if we didn't build the fields. That say nope, and then you'd have to stop. So that's the insurance that's provided.
Well, sorry, through the chair, the construction on these fields is why we wanted to come in front of you folks in April, is because our construction season is now. You don't just go in 2025 and build construct a field with turf. So we're trying to get in there now so that it has time to rest. We can shape the fields in their course, in the seed, and then so they have proper root structure. So we're going to be doing that. I guess to answer your question, we're starting that very soon is moving forward on those fields. Otherwise, we won't be able to meet those milestones.
so that first field is due to be playable, what was it, 2025?
2025, correct.
And
condition 3.
Yep.
On page 18.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to go back to the date of that date in 2025. Because I'm inclined, as a commissioner, as I've listened to the testimony, as I've gone back for the many years that you've been before us, what you're attempting to do and the changes that are being brought forth, I'm looking for something to hold your feet to the fire a little bit. I'm looking to say, I'm not going to go out there and gauge this in 10 years. I'm not going to rest on the city employees to come back and say, hey, you didn't meet this milestone. We're going to put a stop to the fill in the pit. Quite frankly, I think the way I'm going to get behind this is if I see you back here in 2025 and you prove it up. What date? October? October of 2025.
Through the chair, it's the same with all the conditions. If we don't meet a condition, the project's shut down, it gets a cease order, and the project stopped until that condition is...
And it goes in, and then you have other avenues to protest, and you have other petition to the, back into the city. There's other ways that it gets delayed, but it doesn't come back before this commission. And that's where my comfort level is that we have that ability, and then the assembly can overrule us or get along with it. But I've seen cases in my time here in the past that petitioners didn't do what they said they were going to do, and they had a bond requirement placed. So, you know, what you're asking for the community to do, you're getting a great enhancement for an additional timeline. Maybe we can get behind that. Maybe we can get over the issue of the hill and so forth. But everything's been, we're putting soccer fields in. We're putting soccer fields in. We're going to make this a park. To me, you have too many ways out. I'm trying to get you back before us where it still has an economic sense to do what you say you're going to do.
Through the chair, can I respond to that?
Well, why don't, since we're not asking questions, let me ask you one. How does the petitioner feel about the placement of a performance bond to address some of the concerns we're hearing?
Yeah, I'm not sure how that would work. What I can tell you is the milestones we spent.
Let me clear it up.
Sure.
You pay money to an insurance company. They guarantee that you'll do what you said you'll do. If you don't do it, they pay the money.
Yeah. So I understand how we're sorry. But so I guess backing up, when staff asked first thing about milestones, that's what we really put our heads together, because a lot of this is dependent on Phil, on how we're doing this. So we put forth our best effort with aggressive timelines to bring those fields online. Now, the bottom could fall out, we could have another pandemic, and then, oh no, we're still on the hook for those fields in the front line. So we put a lot of time and effort into that and tried to stretch them or give us some wiggle room, and they did not allow for the wiggle room in that. So I feel like we've come to the bond with the milestones, because the permit is revoked. Sorry.
And I think there actually is a bond from about 20 years ago still in effect.
There is a reclamation bond, yes. Sorry.
So it's already bonded.
No, the performance for the purpose of what you're going to do. So unless you're telling me that 20 years ago you said this was always going to be soccer fields. So is that what you're saying? 20 years ago we said we're going to reclaim this land and turn it into, I'm sorry, I didn't go through the chair.
Commissioner Strike, do you have a question?
So we think there's a bond, but
is
it to the performance of what's before us today? And is it even still valid as a bond? Most bonds expire over a period of time, and they're only set for a certain period. So it's a reclamation bond, not a performance bond. Okay.
Yes, there is a reclamation bond that we do every year that we supply as part of the application, or as part of our permit.
But does that address the performance of what is proposed for the result of this? For example, this PLI, I mean, you've got this addressed as a PLI, it's a park.
Oh, here, go ahead.
You know, Mr. Strike, Ryan Mormon, through the chair. Again, I think to define a performance bond, I would say the best definition I heard, a performance bond is to protect an owner from a contractor, not an owner from itself. You know, we're here with our milestones, working with the municipality planning department. They've been really strict. They've laid down real rules and regulations for us, saying, you don't meet these criteria, we will shut you down. And the biggest proponent to the community is actually Mr. Frank Rast. If we do not follow this, we know Mr. Rast and the community council will talk to Francis and the members at the municipality to shut us down. We're miners by trade. We're very familiar working with communities, and what we say we're going to do, we're going to do. And that's brought out in this packet.
I think we're good.
All right.
Okay, is there, I think we will close the public testimony, close the public hearing. The matter rests with the body. What is the will of the body? Commissioner Ron, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, through the chair, I move in case 2023-0030 to approve the amendment to a conditional use permit for land reclamation, subject to conditions 1 through 19 shown on pages 18 through 20 in the staff report.
And that is seconded by Commissioner Krishna. Commissioner Ron, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Fellow commissioners, I look forward to the discussion that's about to ensue. I hesitated to make the motion because this is a case that has been an interesting one, with a lot of information shared, factual and emotional, which to me is markings of healthy debate and a sign of good things happening in the community. I also made the motion because ultimately I do intend to support it, and I'll quickly walk through the reasons why. First and foremost, ultimately I agree with staff's conclusions with respect to the standards that need to be met. I will call attention to one, and that is standard number 7 around significant adverse impacts anticipated to result from the use. And the crux of that is around mitigation or offset to the maximum extent feasible. On page 13 of the staff packet, staff does note that changes to final contours of the site are significant. We heard a lot of discussion around this proposed sledding hill and the importance of it to help make this ultimate concept work, and also the importance of it to those who anticipate it to impact what they currently experience at the site. So I do agree with staff that the contours of the site and changes to them will most likely be significant. In my review of the information provided, the presentation by the applicant, the discussion by members of the community, it would appear that a lot of thought has gone into mitigation and offset. We heard around distances in terms of the earthen burns away from the property line and the centralized location of that sledding hill on the property. I would, for the record, state that I see those as mitigating circumstances. With respect to this being designated as PLI and owned by a private, in this case, developer, I find merit in a fellow commissioner's comment early in the public testimony around it's a design, excuse me, it's a by right use ultimately in terms of establishing a soccer field, establishing something that is consistent with the concept that we're hearing. And as much personal issue as I may have with some of the conflict that the concept creates, I need to stand by that fact that the use, the concept that we're hearing is permitted within PLI. Those comments in totality, taken into consideration with comments made by both opposition and support of the public, leads me towards support for the motion. And with that, I'll stop talking and look forward to comments by others.
Would anyone else care to speak to the motion? Commissioner Krishna.
Yeah, I'll chime in. I also intend to support the motion, although I will say that this is a very difficult one. First of all, I'd like to say this is the highest level of public participation we've received in a number of years, and that's a credit to everyone who showed up and certainly made their voices heard. I would like to state why I intend to support this motion. I do believe that the core issue here is not necessarily the end use or the potential development or maintenance of the soccer fields. That seems broadly consistent with what the applicant has presented in the past about the end use of the site as a recreational facility when the use as a land reclamation site has been completed. Ultimately, I believe that's a by right use for this parcel and is consistent with the comprehensive plan and with the zoning district. I do believe that the core issue that's before the commission is about the addition of 9,000 cubic yards of fill to the site and the elevation contours and the changes to what was previously approved. I want to bring up a point that I think hasn't featured largely in our discussion, and that's about the approval criteria. In specific, I'd like to talk about policy 4.1 in the comprehensive plan and the needs of housing. Ultimately, I think I am choosing to vote in favor because we've heard testimony tonight that the site is very, very critical for housing development and reducing costs for development in Anchorage, and I have not heard today that there are alternatives if the site is closed immediately. I believe that's an overarching issue and is consistent with many other decisions that this commission has made over the last few years to do things such as addressing parking requirements and other things that have contributed to ballooning costs over the last few years and exacerbated other issues like affordable housing. So for those reasons, I intend to support this motion.
Is there anyone else wishing to add findings? We'll go with Commissioner George.
Thank you, through the chair. I want to dovetail a little bit on what Commissioner Krishna mentioned about the by rights usage of this property. I don't think it's this body's prerogative to fault any property owner for exercising their private property rights and their mineral rights in a legal fashion. I believe that these property owners are doing what is within their rights to develop this property and to reclaim it, and I don't know that we have grounds to require them to do more than that. I think we find ourselves on a slippery slope if we try and require them to do anything other than what is required by law. And I also do agree that this property does function much like a utility. It's like a utility, not an actual utility, of course, but it is essential for continued building in our town. I think had it not been for a downturn in housing at various points, it probably would have been full by now. And for that reason, I would like to reiterate what the petitioner said about, there could be extenuating circumstances that could prevent them from performing should we place a bond on them in some fashion, whether it's a pandemic or implosion of the housing market or whatever it might be that contributes fill. So I think I would suggest to my fellow commissioners, if there's a desire to have them come back before this body, that we set an appropriate timeline for them to come back, whether that's to amend the 10 years or otherwise. I think that would be the appropriate method. I think that there are several years left of fill before they reach their current limit, and they have 800,000 cubic yards to go. They've been using about 200,000 cubic yards a year. We're not building like we have in the last few years, but I don't know, maybe road construction dollars will pick up. We'll start building some roads with all that federal money that came through. But for me, the biggest concern is the elevation of the addition. I'd just like to read an excerpt from page 11 of the packet. The homes on the southern end of Endicott Street are already lower than the existing elevation of the fill site. The homes across West Diamond Boulevard are significantly lower than the existing elevation of the site, and the same is true for West Park neighborhood located west of Sand Lake Road. And that brings up points 5, 6, and 7 about, does this alter the characteristics of the surrounding area? Does this impact adjacent properties? And one of the criteria is scope. You know, it's one thing to have a hill, but how big is too big? I guess that's the question for this body. Like, we're the final arbiters of that. So I would be open to having the conversation about why we must include another 900,000 cubic yards at this time when there's 800,000 to go. And I think that's a fair question for the body, so I will just leave it at that. Thank you.
Commissioner Strike.
Thank you, and thank you to the two commissioners and their comments, well received, thank you. One area that I think that I can get through, and I'm going to use the staff's own recommendations, and that is on page 2, last full paragraph. And if the other commissioners might take a look, that last full paragraph identifies the schedule that's put forth, but as importantly, it says AS&G commits to this timeline, and if the deadlines are not met, then they will not be permitted to accept fill, and fill operations will cease. This should be a condition of approval. And nowhere did I see in the condition of approval did that make it into, I'm being told number 3, but in that, I'm looking at the verbiage. Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may directly address the Commissioner's comment. Department recommendation number 3 on page 18 of the staff packet, I believe.
Okay. I can get through that. I can get by that one then. Thank you. I would entertain any other comments from the previous commissioner on his conversation or on his comments about the that you addressed.
I'll just step in here. I guess for the public, we were discussing the staff recommendation number 3, which requires soccer fields to be made by a certain timeline that's included in our packet. For the commissioners, if you wanted to make an amendment to the main motion, now would be a great time to consider making that. Otherwise, we can debate or proceed to a vote.
For purposes of discussion, I would like to move to amend to remove the additional fill that is proposed without amending the timeline.
Is there a second?
Mr. Chair, may I seek clarification on the motion that's before us?
Yes. And I'm not positive if we have a second yet. So Commissioner Ron, go ahead and ask your question.
Commissioner George, would you mind just helping me understand when you say additional proposed fill, is that in reference to the 900,000 cubic yards and then amending the timeline? Can you clarify, is that not amending at all, or the 2034? What's the context you're thinking of there?
Through the chair, thank you for the opportunity to clarify. This proposed amendment would remove the addition of 900,000 additional cubic yards beyond the current approved amount without amending the 10-year portion of this extension. Those would be the only changes. Thank you.
Do we have a second? Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a second. Commissioner George, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you. Through the chair, I think I touched on a lot of the points. This is an opportunity to take the temperature of the body on this particular item. I know it's the one that's probably had the most public testimony in opposition. I note that the Sand Lake Community Council did specifically request this item. I feel that community councils should carry great weight and deference with this body. If there is an urgency to add additional fill to this site, then we should evaluate that on its merits, not because of one specific park function that it would potentially add or structure. Would we add 900,000 yards simply because we want a sledding hill, or is there a need in our community for this utility? And I think that's the conversation that we might want to evaluate this under, and do we need to do that today? Thank you.
Commissioner Pullis.
I think I would just like to give the petitioner a chance to address this amendment. And, I think there was discussion of this being not economically feasible without that 900,000. So I think it's a good opportunity to let them provide a comment on that. Please.
Thank you. Through the chair, Commissioner, if you look at the milestone detail on 54, the milestones are dependent on the approval of CUP and the additional fill and time year extension. We need that to be able to build the rest of the park. Just as Mr. Zins said, there's the fill to fields. Any other comments? Anything else? All right, thank you.
Unless anybody else wants to chime in, I'll speak to the motion. I don't intend to support the amendment. I hear the concern with the sledding hill. I'm not the biggest fan of the sledding hill. A lot of that may be based on experience with soccer fields with sledding hills right next to them elsewhere in town. I will say that having spent quite a few hours over the weekend in the wind on the side of a soccer field, the topography change, even 15 foot of difference, it definitely makes a difference. And so I don't know that the sledding hill accomplishes that as best as it could for the use of soccer. But with that being said, we do need this utility. I do think that it's important for the city of Anchorage to have a place to dump material. And like I said, for the intended use of soccer in a windy area, this is probably windier than Kincaid, considering its proximity to the prevailing winds. So I think the topography will be needed for the intended use. And so therefore, I don't intend to support the amendment. Bear with me, this is my first meeting, so I'm learning how to call the vote. Verify this is the vote on the amendment.
Ms. Eber?
No.
Okay, that motion failed, and now we are back to the main motion. Is there any other members wishing to discuss or add findings?
Can I speak, I guess? Sorry, I'm on the phone.
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that, I've been listening to everything everybody's had to say. I've listened to all the public testimony, and I think that this is, overall, in general, this is a positive thing for our community. A private company is trying to do something positive that doesn't require funding from taxpayers that's going to benefit, the children and potentially, people moving into our community. So I intend to support this. I don't tend to love this flooding hill portion of it, but I think in general it's an overall positive perk for our community.
Anybody else? I will add some final comments. I do intend to support the motion. It sounds like we have some time on this sledding hill idea, so for the petitioner, I guess that's the main point of contention. It sounds like it's not the most popular item, and so if you did choose to look for some amendments in the future, you might find some favor with the body. With that, I will call the vote.
Ms. Eber?
Yes.
And that motion passes. All right, we want to welcome Commissioner Strike back to the commission. And do anybody else have any other comments? Hearing.
One second. It's Ryan Mormon. Again, thank you, through the chair, members of the board. Thank you very much for your support and willingness to read 300 and some pages. And again, it's a big success for Anchor Sand and Gravel and the soccer community.
Thanks, Ryan. That wasn't for you. Commissioner comments. We're going to adjourn here momentarily. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Pullis, seconded by Mr. Strike. Any objections? Hearing none, we are adjourned.